Learn to be super successful. Subscribe to my channel, Meathead. What if I was to judge you coming to this seminar based on the 5 people you spent the last 5 years with? There'd be nobody sitting out here. That, and I don't know what hang means, and I don't know what that, but about 3 or 4 years ago, we were taking the Orient Express from Italy to London, and we stopped in Verona, I think, the train. And the Orient Express is a great thing to spend money on. It's very expensive. Take it. And we stopped at Verona. And the ruins, and I didn't know it was famous for Roman ruins. You hike up about 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers up on top of a hill. And you sit there and you look down. Yeah, it's beautiful. And then we're waiting about 40, 45 minutes. And then Sally says, I think we're chilling. And I looked at her and I said, what do you mean? We've been here 40 minutes and nobody's come to ask us what we wanted to have to drink. I leaped up from the table, actually knocked the table over, leaped up, ran up another 50 meters, started screaming at the fucking, in my best Italian, which isn't that good, you lazy cunts. And cunt is kind of a universal word. So I have chilled. Not on purpose, but by accident. Anything else about Mr. Trump Jr.? Now, the backward bicycle. You are all, even Ravi, at the backward bicycle stage. We used to have the bike here. It was too distracting. We got rid of it. I tried, not 1,000 times, but a couple hundred times for sure. I never could ride it. We had nobody in the seminar, in the history of the seminar, ever ride it. Then one day, the CEO of the Swiss candy company that Federer is a sponsor of, Lind. Anyway, her husband and her son came to pick her up from the seminar. Kid's 7 years old, got on the bike and rode it halfway down to the gate and back. 7 years old. He started to pedal like you would normally pedal and realized that didn't work. So he's the only person that's ever ridden that bike for us. And we had a lot of people. And none of you could ride it. Why is that? Other than you're hardwired. By the time you're your age, you're hardwired already. Unfortunately, most of you for failure. Not just you, but most of the people that attend the seminar. Most people that indulge in personal development are hardwired for failure. Can you imagine almost everybody in this room, if they had a goal and it hasn't been completed, you'd tell me or whoever asked, I'm working on it. Can you imagine Steve Jobs ever saying, I'm working on it? No, and I worked with Steve for a while. I was one of the last guys to see him alive in Bangalore, India. I'm working on it. That speaks volumes, not about what you're working on, but about you. I've never said that. Why do you always say it? That's your excuse. It makes it, you pretend like you had some sort of strategy to fulfill the end being you solve that problem when you don't. I've said this countless times, about 20 plus years ago. The founder of Combined Insurance, W. Clement Stone, needed a sales technique for a new product so he could sell more whole life insurance. Whole life insurance is insurance that you, ostensibly it's a savings plan, and you pay about triple the premiums, and it's a savings plan, so at the end of 5, 10, 20 years, at least one of you in here, that's so much hot cock, it's unbelievable. People laugh at you in the insurance business when you say you're buying whole life. But anyway, and so he was searching around, all his marketing people didn't know what to call this new product. So he called Napoleon Hill, who had been, I think, bankrupt 3 times. This is the early 50s. 3 times he had been bankrupt. Napoleon Hill is famous for being thrown in prison for rape, for abandoning his second son because he was born with no ears. I can go on and on and on. But the book has got merit, okay? And he didn't meet Andrew Carnegie, etc. So he calls him to Chicago, and they sit down over a weekend, and they try to come up. And I talked to Napoleon Hill. I set up a dinner with him in Chicago. I talked to him 3 times on the phone, and he said, Mr. Peña, in honesty, and that's because he was 100 years old then. He was almost 100. He said, it's probably because I'm getting old. I can't remember if Napoleon came up with the idea, or I came up with the idea, or one of my assistants came up with the idea, and they jumped up and says, personal development. You can't measure that. And the personal development industry was born, 1951, 52. A scam to sell whole life insurance to his 10,000-man sales force. Almost everybody in this room has taken or read a book, taken a course, podcast, on personal development. It's not the why, it's the how. I never asked why of anything. I'll be 78 in a couple of weeks. In my entire life, I never asked why. Never. I only asked the how. And let's digress to Tom. I had heard in Hollywood, and I've been working on this movie thing for about 10 years. And so we were interviewing people, and I heard that Tom Cruise's top assistant had left him. And his top assistant wasn't Scientology. I'm not saying anything good or bad about Scientology. I don't give a shit. And I was having a coffee with him at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Beverly Hills, California. And the first question I asked is, why in the fuck did you leave him? And he looked down, a little tear. I don't know, Mr. Peña, but it was a massive mistake on my part. And then he explained how Tom Cruise operates. Every day he gets up like he never made a movie. Every day he gets up like he never made a penny. Every day he gets up, he's a physical fitness fanatic, like he was before he made the first Top Gun, which wasn't his first movie, by the way, but it was when he was young. And that's how he operates. I haven't had to work in almost 40 years. I've been asked by college students and some of you, how do you have the initiative to get up in the morning? I never thought of it until I was asked that question by an Oxford kid or a kid at University of Edinburgh, someplace in the last 7 or 8 years that I've been speaking at universities. But I have a drive that most of you don't have. In fact, most of the people that come through the seminar don't have. Marcus Bauer happens to have that drive. But personal development is not going to help you with that drive. You wasted all your money. Otherwise, bless you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Because personal development says anybody can be president. That's a fucking lie. That's maybe the biggest lie. But you want to believe. In my neighborhood, I didn't know, I had never heard the word million. It's hard to believe. I had never heard the word million until I was 21 years old. And this is on YouTube. And I'm at the Ramstein Officers Club in Ramstein, Germany. And I walk into the Officers Club, and they were like 6, 8, 10 deep at the bar, just trying to get drinks. And I asked a captain buddy of mine, I said, what are they doing? He says, Bale inherited $1.4 million. And then I said, could you write it down on a napkin? This is a true story. And you know how when you write on maybe you don't know. If you write on a wet napkin, it gets blurry. And he put 1 comma. And the drinks were 25 cents. So I did a quick calculation that I better get in the bar because I thought we were going to run out of money. $1,400,000 to about 80, 90 drunken servicemen in the mid-60s. Of course, we could be drinking there still today and not run out of the money at 25 cents a drink. But I never heard the word million, and I never had seen it written down. It's but my social and economic milieu, the people that I hung with, to the extent that I hung with anybody, were worried about staying out of jail, running from the draft like President Trump did, 7 deferments. My kids, or my generation, you either ran to Canada, ran to Mexico, or went in the service. They had the draft. I volunteered for the draft. Because even though we were uneducated, ill-mannered, we felt an obligation to support the country. Of course, that idea is dead now. But I mean, and so I volunteered for the draft. My dad had volunteered for 2 wars, so I volunteered for 1. I did what my dad did. Getting back to your question, you want to know the how. You're going to learn the how. And I will not answer questions about the why. Because the why is not important. If you can't resolve in your mind, to the extent that you have one, that the only thing that's important is how to do it. One of the first things that you do in the military, they say never volunteer for anything. My dad said, unless you want to achieve. And I was a regular Army officer. I volunteered for everything. But then one fateful night, again at the bar, and the 2 general officers that are there just above the fire thing, there to the left of the door, General Woodrow Vaughn and General Roy Atterbury. I'm standing between those 2 guys, and the guy on the left says, Danny, you're buying the drinks. And I said, why, General? I bought the drinks first. And then Roy Atterbury said words to the effect, well, I think Lieutenant Peña probably wants to know why she should buy the drinks. I had won an award, blah, blah, blah. And he said, a young man like you could get rich in the civilian world. And a light bulb as big as this motherfucking pavilion went off over my head. I was out of the Army in 6.5 months. You'd still be spreadsheet, did you know that? The pros and the cons. I'm giving up my pension, right? My medical benefits, free education, right? I haven't done a spreadsheet in 35 years. In those days, they were, the best I can remember, they called it Lotus 1, 2, 3. You'd still be thinking about it. Because I'm not afraid of the consequences. And the people on that board, for the most part, aren't afraid of the consequences. Back bicycle. That's how hard it is to reprogram you. Some of you will never get reprogrammed. Some of you are so hardwired, it's going to be, you're like that. You can still make a lot of money. But the guys that make the big money, that can throw everything they learn out the fucking window, the guys that change the world, and I'm not a changer, even though I have changed the world, creating $1 trillion, a million millionaires at least. The guys that change the world, although that wasn't my goal, are the guys that can reprogram yourself and rewire yourself. And I would be a disingenuous old man, lying old man if I told you it was easy. I'm going to tell you the truth. It's almost impossible. Almost is the operative word. But it's not impossible because I was able to do it. And I produced a bunch of guys and gals that have been able to do it. And Allah willing, there's 1 or 2 of you that reprogram in here. Any other comments about Barron or the backward bicycle?
Mr. Peña, I take a bit of a contrarian view with the way Trump was...
You have?
Yeah, well, I mean, a little bit of it.
Well, I'm waiting with bated breath. Tell me.
Okay, well, I mean, a lot of these kids are very successful men. Sure, they happen to taste mediocre success, but nobody goes on to surpass what their fathers were able to do. So, I mean, Bill Gates' daughter isn't going to build Microsoft. Lisa Jobs isn't going to do any of that. And I think same thing, like, albeit they're very successful, obviously more successful than any of us. But it doesn't seem like they really surpass what their fathers did. Trump happened to surpass what his father did, and his father was successful, but
well, and the story is that Trump's dad gave him $100 million to start. Okay. Of course, Donald denies that vehemently. I'm not sure it's true or not. It doesn't matter. It's so long ago, it doesn't matter because he's gone on to do a lot of other things. But I mean, Henry Ford, the first Ford, none of his kids or progenies done anything remotely like him. Andrew Carnegie had one daughter, and when he didn't have a son, he more or less gave up. My own kids, it's not likely they will ever do anything remotely like I have done. But you don't need Stephen Hawking, the great physicist who died a few years ago. In 2004, Stephen Hawking said at Cambridge in a lecture, this is while he could still talk, and he kind of talk and not have to use that thing on the computer on his vocal cords. He said, this is 2004, we are a derivative of a chimpanzee with a small brain that on an average planet, and we have already passed the precipice as a Homo sapien. He said that in 2004. We're through. I said it in 2008. I didn't know that he said it in 2004. We're through. Are we through in 200 years or 150 years? Most of you, and I've said this for 15, 20 years, in September 2142, an asteroid is going to hit the Earth. September 2142. Not maybe, not suppose, not that there's one chance in a million. It's going to hit the motherfucking Earth. Do you ever read about it? No. Does anybody give a shit? No. It's just a matter of time. I think we're going to be extinct before that due to our own resources. The real reason, in my judgment, that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, amongst others, want to go to another planet because they know the Earth's through. When I went to the Pentagon about a year ago, and I went to the space agency, the new agency that Mr. Trump founded when he was president, it was empty. We could not find one swinging dick or a pair of tits in the whole motherfucking building. Sally said, it was a Wednesday. Sally said, well, maybe we're here on the wrong day. And the guide, the officer that was our guide, it's like this every day. How is that possible? But see, I think about stuff you guys don't think about. How many of you have read the 3,700-page report from United Nations published in November last year about climate change? Nobody. I have. If we stopped on January 1, 2023, all the shit that everybody complains about global warming, the green guys, and all, if we stopped everything, right? Minimum of 500 years before it would have effect. Maximum 1,000 years, and maybe never. Look it up. You didn't see it once on the news. I asked a few universities after it was published, some really cutie pie, and she said, oh, if I thought that, I'd drop my placards and I'd go party. We're through. But it makes it perfect for us. The more disinclined people are, high interest rates aren't going to bankrupt the world in the next 4 or 5 years. But as long as enough people think that it's going to bankrupt the world, it's perfect for us. He's going to talk about, I think, he bought companies for £1. If I told you that before you ever heard about me, you'd say I'm full of shit. And he talked about briefly last night having people pay him to take the company back. I've done that. You haven't. It wasn't in your toolbox. And again, I don't like to use that terminology. But now we've got numbnuts with 50 IQs running around that they've got that. They think that and seller's finance are the only things in the toolbox. If those are the only two tools you think you have, you use them. Remember, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That's a little too high and lofty for you. But that means just because you never met anybody that does this shit or talks this shit doesn't mean it's not true. And the worst thing you're going to do when you leave here is you're going to try to explain it to your spouse, your significant other, your business partners, and your family, and you're going to fail. Because the rejection is going to be so overwhelming. Remember those 1,000-foot tsunami pictures? You're going to see a couple of them. You remember those? That's what it's going to feel like. Well, fuck, being a fifth-generation fucking farmer from Minnesota is not that bad. And you'll figure out a reason why to not do anything. Any questions? Okay, YouTube.